Good evening, and thanks for joining tonight's TI Technology webinar hosted by Texas Instruments, where tonight we're excited to be bringing to you a beginning coding webinar to help you learn how to code in Python. My name is Mike Houston, and I'm the moderator for this event. I teach algebra and calculus near Pittsburgh, where I use TI Technology to make those tough to teach, tough to learn concepts accessible to all my students. Tonight we're joined by our two beginning coding experts in Python, Tony Norell and Amin Lalani. Tony has over 25 years of teaching experience in mathematics, ranging from 5th grade all the way up through college algebra. She's a TQ regional instructor and a recipient of the Presidential Award for Excellence in Math and Science Teaching. Tony, it's great to have you with us tonight.
Thanks, Mike. I'm glad to be here. Looking forward to coding with Python with Amin.
And Amin just received his degrees from UT Tyler and UT Austin. He's been an educator for the past 17 years, so I probably didn't actually just receive his degrees. He has taught high school math. He just looks really young. He has taught high school math at Palestine High School and Taylor High School. Currently, he is a clinical professor within the You Teach Dallas program that prepares future STEM educators. He does consulting work for TI to support districts that are working to implement TI technology on their campuses. He also works with We Teach CS to support CS teachers locally and nationally. So, Amin, it's great to have you with us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to share some of the Python with the CX2. Thank you for having me.
If you have any questions tonight, feel free to submit those using the Q&A window on the right side of your screen. We'll also be using the chat window to send general messages. As a reminder, the session is being recorded, and we'll provide a link to the event certificate of attendance at the conclusion of the webinar. We hope you don't have any audio issues, but in the event that you do, try selecting the audio broadcast button at the bottom of your screen. At this point, Tony is going to discuss our agenda.
Thank you, Mike. So we're going to look at Python functions tonight. There's 3 functions that we're going to define, a hello world program, a hello name, and then a tax. And I believe we have a drawing at the end of the webinar. And Mike, can you tell us what that's for?
Yeah, we're really excited that our TQ summer workshops are live on our website and able to be checked out and registered for. And one lucky winner tonight is going to receive a TQ summer workshop registration for free. So stick around to the end for that.
Awesome.
And then Tony, would you also talk through some expected outcomes for us tonight?
Sure, thanks, Mike. So by the end of the session, you should be able to create and save Python programs and also be able to create and define functions both with and without parameters.
That's great. I'm excited. So, Amin, I gave you control. Feel free to share your screen.
Okay, and Amin, while you're getting started, so we're going to be coding in Python on the CX2, and if you'd like, you can code along with us. If your operating system is 5.2 or greater, you can also code along with us if you have the TI-Nspire Premium Teacher software. But I understand if you're currently using TI-Nspire Teacher software, you can call 1-800-TI-CARES and they will upgrade you to the premium software that you can use to code in Python. So if you aren't able to code tonight, you can just follow along with us, sit back and watch as Amin uses his software, and then you'll be able to watch this webinar because it's being recorded tonight, so you can go back and you can code along with it at another time. How does that sound, Amin?
That sounds great. Thank you so much, Tony.
Okay.
All right, so the first thing we want to do is make sure that you have the proper software. So if you're using your CX2s or the teacher software, so the first thing you want to do is, if you're on your handheld, to turn on your handheld, click on Control and N. And if you're on your teacher software, you can click on File, I'm going to be doing this in a handheld view. So at this point, if you clicked on that and you notice that there's an option for add Python. So again, if you are on your handheld, click on, do Control and N for new document. And if you don't see Python at the very bottom, just like Tony stated, you're not running the most current operating system, which is perfectly fine. We suggest that you sit back, watch this, and when you are able to update, that you go back and watch the video. It should be released within a few days. So the first thing that we need to do is to create a new file, name a new Python file. So I'm going to go into New. So again, the way I did that was going into Files. I went into Handheld, or you can click on Control, and N for New, and you should see that option at the very bottom for Python. So the first Python file we're going to create is called Hello. So I'm going to name this Hello. And let's do this. I'm going to name it Hello World with a space in the middle.
So, I mean, I was wondering, can we name it like one Hello World?
So let's try it. And what I like about coding sometimes is just, let's do Hello World at this point. So we're starting with a numerical value. Is that what you mean, Tony?
Yes.
All right, so if I do that, if I hit enter, you'll notice the TI-Nspire is really good about throwing you some errors to let you know how to rectify or to fix. So it says name should not start off with a digit. So we can definitely have digits at the very end. One other thing you cannot do is have spaces in between. So if I did hello space world, and if I hit OK, you'll notice it throws an error at me. So just be mindful of the limitations on how to name a file. So we're just going to call this hello world without any space. And when you are ready, you're going to hit OK or enter. So at this point, you'll notice we have a .py. That's the Python file called hello world. And in just a little bit, we'll talk about the distinction between the DOC at the very top. So this right here is your Python file at this point. So let's go ahead and write our first function. But before we can write our function, and I'll talk a little bit about why we are using functions, what's the benefit of a function. What I like to do is comment when I write my programs. It's a good practice to have. So within your handheld or on your teacher, make sure that you're on the document view or the handheld view. So if you click on handheld, I'm going to click on menu, and I'm going to choose the option for edit, and you'll notice there's an option for comments. So I'm going to click on comments. So in a programming language like Python, when you actually have a hashtag or pound symbol, anything I write over here is not going to be executed. It's just basically information about what you might be doing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to document our first program. So I'm going to say we're going to define a function with no parameters. So if you are thinking about, hey, I mean, I really don't know what a parameter is and what is happening over there. So we're going to talk about in detail about each part, what a parameter is, what a function is. So let's go ahead and actually insert a function so we can actually talk about what a function is in detail. So menu-driven features in TI-Nspire CX II are really helpful if you are starting to code. So if you click on menu, and if you look at built-ins, which is number 4, you'll see that the very first one that we have is called functions. So I'm going to click on functions, and then I'm going to click on either 1, or I'm just going to click using my mouse pad. So that way I get the block structure for a function. So the word DEF, which is highlighted in blue, is actually a keyword within Python. There are other keywords such as return or, so there's a list of keywords. So DEF is a built-in keyword for Python. So you'll notice that we have 3 different things we can complete. Function is the name of the function that we're going to write. So what is a function? Let's step back for a little bit. So a function is nothing more than a program that contains blocks of codes inside of it. And when we call on this function, those blocks of codes are executed only when we call on that function. So as a math teacher, this is a great way to kind of embed math with also computer science. So in this case, since we said this is a hello world, or we're going to do something dealing with hello, I'm going to name this function hello. You can use your non-QWERTY keyboard at the very bottom, and I'm just going to type in the word hello. If you use your touchpad, if you click on the right key, you'll notice automatically it takes you to argument. Now, argument and parameters, those are the type of terms that you'll hear in computer science. So argument is nothing more than information that a user is going to provide when they call on this function. But for the first one, we're saying we don't want the user to give me any information. So what I'm going to do is simply click on delete, because I'm not expecting my user to give me any information. All right, now we just have to do some coding within the blocks. So I'm going to hit the down key on my touchpad. So in a function, you'll see that something is indented. So everything that's indented within this function will be executed when I call on this function. So what is the thing that we want to do for this hello function? What I want to do is simply print a message to the user. That's what I'm going to do. And the way we can do that is click on menu. And our go-to friend at this point is going to be the built-ins. So I'm going to go into built-ins. And then you'll notice at the very top, there's an IO. That stands for inputs and outputs. So what we want to do is we want to do something with an output. We want to give some information to the user. So you can click on the number 6 or just use your touchpad. And then we're going to choose number 1, which is print. We're going to print something for the user. Okay. All right, we're almost there. So now what are we going to print? We're going to print a message, which is a string. So another topic that we want to talk about is a string. You need to have quotation marks, a single or double. Often when we talk about this, we're going to use double quotation mark, but you can use single. And there's a conversation that we can have in terms of what happens when we have apostrophe. But in this case, we're going to use double quotations. So how do we enter that? Well, you can click on Control, the multiplication key. And now we're just going to type in our message. So my hello is going to be uppercase. So the way you can do uppercase on your handheld, click on Shift. I'm going to put H, and I'm going to do hello, and then we'll just say hello world. So if you're into programming, any language that you learn, we tend to do hello world. So since we have a string, we have double quotation, we need to actually end it with that. There's a second way we can embed double quotation. You'll notice that there is right next to G, that little question mark and exclamation mark. If we click on that, you'll notice we have also a way to get the quotation marks. So I'm going to click on that, and you'll notice as soon as I did that, the string is in green, the keywords are in blue, and I'm going to pause for a second here to make sure that you have what I have at this point, or if you have any questions at this point. And Tony, any questions on the chat window at this point that we need to address?
No, I think people are following along, and I just want to tell you, I love the built-ins because I don't know, unlike you, I don't know all the syntax of Python, and so even when I try to type it in, I forget things like that colon or the indentation, and then I get syntax errors. And so it's so neat that it puts the whole template in there for you, and all you have to do is fill it in. I love that.
Perfect. And Karen, yeah, you're exactly right. I'm making sure that the people that are using their handheld, I can show them the keys. But yes, if you're using a keyboard or teacher software, you really can use your keyboard and then type and use quotation mark, all the things that I'm doing instead of the menu driven. Just like Tony's saying, I think for me, if you're learning to start to code in Python, I think those pre-built in structure are really beneficial to help with coding. All right, so remember we said function is nothing more than some codes within the body of the function where when we call on it, it will execute. So I'm going to hit enter, and you'll notice as soon as I hit enter, it thinks I want to do something more because it's indented. I'm done writing my function. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit delete, backspace twice. And all I want to do now is I want to call on this function. So how do I call on this function? Well, I can either type our name of our function, hello, open parentheses, close, or we can click on this var, V-A-R, which is for variable. It actually stores our variables and functions. And you'll notice as soon as I define this function, it already knows I have a function called hello. And just for visual, I'm just going to hit enter to kind of break. So Python is not going to be bothered by this, but just to show you that I have some space, I'm going to call on this function hello. And how do we run this? Well, to run this, menu, our friend, we're going to click on menu. And you'll notice number 2, we have 2 options. We can check our syntax and save, or we can run it. And when we run it, it does check for syntax and it does save it automatically. So if you wanted to do shortcut, you can do Control and R, or you can just look at the menu, go to menu, number 2 and number 1. So let's go ahead and click on number 1. And you'll notice I have my output. So 1.1 is actually our editor. 1.2 is our shell. And how do I go back and forth on my handheld? What you can do is you can go Control and left, or Control or right, or using your mouse on the teacher software, you can just toggle back and forth. Now, one other thing you can do is if you go to 1.1, we can actually see the editor and the shell at the same time. So we might want to have a side-by-side instead of actually going back to 1.1 and 1.2. So the way you do that is if you go to 1.1, you want to click on menu. What we want to do is then go into, actually not there, I apologize. We actually want to click on docs. So I apologize. Go to 1.1, click on doc, go into page layout, and you'll see there's an option at the very bottom for us to group. What it's going to do is it's going to group 1.1 and 1.2 together. Shortcut key is Control-4. I'm going to click on number 7. And you'll notice now we have both the editor and the shell on the same view.
That's a really nice view. I mean, especially if I might want to take a snapshot of that and use it on a, with students on a handout or something like that, where they can see both parts at the same time.
I do agree. I definitely like it when you're trying to, the only issue, Tony, here is if you have long codes, it gets really difficult to see. So you just have to be mindful of when, there's some pluses and benefits, but I agree, as you're learning, just having the shell and the editor at the same visual field, I think is definitely beneficial. So one additional thing, if you're new, you might notice that on the left-hand side, I have almost a blue-gray rectangle around the left. That means at this point, I am on the left of this. So I'm within the editor. So you might say, how do I get to the shell? Well, the way you do that is if you do Control and Tab, you'll notice now that rectangle border is within the Python shell. And I'll do that one more time. I'm going to do Control and Tab. So making sure that we're in the hello world.py editor, and we'll go ahead and run our program. That way we can actually see the output within the shell. So again, making sure that we're on the left side, which is the editor. We're going to click on menu. We're going to click on run, and we're going to do number 1. If you like shortcut keys, remember Control R will do the same thing. And here you go. Now we have that side by side that you're talking about, Tony, right? So now I can actually see I wrote a program, I ran the program, so I call this function, and I can see the output of my function, hello.
Very nice.
So a couple of things about your shell. So within the shell, we can actually code small fragments, and we can actually practice possibly coding within the shell as well. So let's say if I wanted to find out what is 2 plus 4, I can actually get an output. So within the shell, you can interact. For the purpose of this, we're going to be working with the editor and using the shell to really display that output. One other note about the Python shell. If you click on VAR, you'll notice it knows that you called on a function. It has that memory. So we can actually reuse it if we wanted to. But just a reminder that we do have some history there, which we can clear out. So what happens if I wanted to actually clear everything on my Python shell? So the way you do that is if you click on Menu, you go to Tools, and we can simply click on Clear History, and you'll notice everything is gone. Now, when I clear history, it does not clear this hello function. To be able to do that, you would have to click on Menu, Tools, and we have to reinitialize the shell. And if you did that, that history, that memory is gone at that point. Okay? So let's go ahead and go to the left side and make sure that we're on the hello world.py. I'm going to go ahead and unsplit. So at this point, these are grouped together. So if I click on Menu, actually I keep doing Menu, I apologize. It's actually Dock, Page Layout. And I think, Tony, you put this on the chat window. Control-4 to group together. To ungroup, you would do Control-N6. So I'm just going to do that. And you'll notice at this point, those two pages have been split. All right, so now we have our 1.1. Tony, I think you were saying something. I apologize. I might have interrupted you.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say, I really like the idea of putting a comment in like you did, so that when someone looks at your program, whether it's your students and you're asking them to run this program or whatever, you know, it tells them what it's doing. And then the other thing I noticed, Amin, is, okay, Hello World now has an asterisk beside it. And then I also noticed up at the top, there's a dock with an asterisk beside it.
So that's a good point, Tony. So what we are having at this point is we have this Python file, which is the .py. So this asterisk means that we did something to our program that we've not saved. So that's what that means. So we can actually go into Menu. We can actually go into Run. I'm not going to run it. I'm just going to say check syntax and save, or we can do Control and B. And you'll notice as soon as I did that, that asterisk went away because there's nothing new for it to save. Now, that did not remedy that other concern that you had is, hey, I mean, why is there an asterisk at the very top? That is our TNS file. So this .py file is actually within our TNS file, and we have not saved our TNS file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to save our TNS file. I like shortcut keys. So the way I would save this is I'm going to click on Control, and then you'll notice right under Escape, there's a word called Save. I'm going to click on that. So as soon as I do that, it says, all right, file name, tell me where do you want to save it. So I'm going to peel back one more layer. I'm going to say, I think it's beneficial for us to create a folder. So what I'm going to do is first create a new folder by clicking on this little plus sign here. And I might name this TI training, and I'm going to say this is on for 20. So I'm going to name it. So I'm going to create a folder. And when I'm ready, I'm going to hit enter. And you'll notice that I have a folder. So now I can click using my touchpad to the folder. And now I know I'm within this folder called TI training that was held on 4/20th. And now it's asking me, hey, I mean, what do you want to name this file, the TNS file? I'm going to call this Hello World. And remember, this is the TNS file. So I'm going to hit save. Oh, it gave me an error. So let's see. Let's try that one more time. So I'm going to do Control, save. I'm going to go to my place right here. Okay. So now we have both asterisks completely gone. We have hello world saved, which is the TNS, and we also have the .py saved. Now, once we save it one time, from this point on, all we do is simply control and save, and that will save the TNS file. Okay, so let's go ahead and make some changes, and then we'll update this. So we've defined a function with no parameter. Well, the next thing naturally is what happens if we want to create a function with a parameter? Parameter meaning the user has to give me some information when they call on this function. So same thing as I did before, I'm going to use the comment feature. So I'm going to click on menu. I'm going to go under edit. I'm going to do number 3. Shortcut key is Control T. And then I'm going to say define a function with one parameter. All right, so let's go ahead and get our little template. And the way we get our template is clicking on menu, built-ins, go to functions, and then we're going to go into defining functions. All right, so what do we want to call this one? So we want to distinguish this between hello, and we're going to ask the user for something. So let's call this hello, and I'm going to say hello name. So that's going to be the name of our function.
Amin,
Yes, ma'am?
when you say we're going to define a function with one parameter, is that basically talking about an argument in this template?
Yeah, so there's some, so if we use, now later on, as you get more acclimated with computer science, so there are actually 2 types of parameters, Tony. One is called a formal parameter, one is called an actual parameter. In this situation, the parameter is going to be what the user provides. So argument, if I use the word argument and parameter at this point, I want you to think about them as very similar, which is nothing more than we're going to ask user to give us some information. And in this parentheses, we're going to define a variable to store that information that's being provided by the user.
Okay.
So since we're saying hello name, we're going to call this variable name. So what's going to happen is when the user calls this function, whatever information that the user gives us will be stored under name, and then whatever we do within the block, that will be executed using the information that's provided by the user, specifically whatever they gave us that's passed to the variable name. So in computer science, the name would actually be called a formal parameter. And then when the user gives us their name, that will be called an actual parameter. Okay. All right, so we're almost there. So now we have our new function called hello name. We have a parameter or argument that we're going to ask the user to give us their name. And then we want to do something with this within the block. So I'm going to go under menu. I'm going to go under built-ins. And remember, we need some IO inputs and outputs. So we're going to display some information to the user. So I'm going to click on number 6, and I'm going to do print. So I want to print a message along with their name. So as this function is called, it's more dynamic because depending on the user, different names will be passed through. So it's not static like our hello world. Guess what? Every time we run that function, Tony, it's going to just print out hello world. In this, depending on the information that's provided by the user, our message will change based on that info that's passed through by the user in this hello name function.
Great. This must be what all those emails that I sign up for, where I get personal emails that say, hello, Tony.
Oh yeah, they're replacing your name with, so they have these little templates where they're just saying, okay, replace all these locations with Tony's name, and then send that message to make it really personal. You're exactly right.
Mhm.
All right, so now since we're trying to first put a message to the user, since it's a string, we're gonna click on this little key right next to G. We're gonna use the double quotation. And let's say we're gonna say hello, and I have to close it. So I'm going to click back on the key right next to G. So there's a couple of ways you can actually display a message to a user, and we're going to do it both ways. So one way is using a comma, we can actually split. So we can say, hey, print the word hello, and then the next thing I want you to do is display the username. So Tony, in this situation, where are we storing this information that's being provided by the user?
So we're storing it in that variable that we called name, correct?
Yes. So in this situation, we want to make sure that we're going to say hello, comma, name. So whatever the user gives us, it's going to basically print this message, and the comma is just basically going to give a space between the word hello and whatever name that you provide. That's what's going to happen at this point. And you can't have more than one comma. So if I had another variable, I can also put a comma and then display multiple variables if I choose to do that.
Okay.
I'm going to hit enter. I am done with my function called hello name. I just want to call on it. So I'm going to hit backspace or delete twice. Just for a visual break, I'm going to hit enter one time, and I'm going to run our new function that we wrote called hello name. So to be able to do that, I'm going to click on var, and you'll notice now it says, hey, now you have two functions. You have hello and you have hello name. So let's go ahead and do hello name. And what if we actually ran our function without actually giving it information? So let's just say we try to run this program. So we can do Control R to run, or we could do menu, run, number one. And you'll notice as soon as I do that, Tony, what does it say? It's saying, hey, what's going on here?
Yeah, so let me move this out of the way. So it takes positional arguments, but 0 were given. So we gave it a formal argument up at the top, right? The variable name, but we didn't give it anything in the method call. We didn't give it an actual name in there.
Yeah, so I was expecting us to give some information, and since we didn't give it any information, it's like, hey, this function requires you to give me at least one argument. You were supposed to pass something, you didn't give me anything, I need something. So let's go ahead and give it something. So I'm going to say, I'm going to pass through Amin.
Yeah, so I really just want to put your name in there, and I'm thinking that it's going to know that I want Amin to be for name.
Yes. Okay,
Okay.
so my question is, what will happen if I run this at this point? I'm going to give probably 5 seconds for the audience to think. What's going to happen if we run this program? Are we going to get the hello Amin that we desire at this point? All right, so let's go ahead and try it out. I'm going to go ahead and use my shortcut key, Control R at this point. So if you're joining us, you can also go into menu, run, and click on number 1, but I'm going to do Control and R. And you'll notice that it says, hey, Amin isn't defined, because we are to pass a string. My name is a string. At this point, without the string, it thinks it's a variable. I've never defined a variable, so it's like really confused at this point. It's going, okay, I don't know what you want me to do, Amin, because I don't know what's going on.
So Amin, Jenny said that Amin has to be in quotes.
Yeah, she's exactly right. So what we need to do is go to this little key right next to G, and we're going to do those double quotations just like we did earlier. And now let's see what happens. Does that remedy our issue. So Control R, and you'll notice hello world came from our first function call. Then we passed through my name, which is Amin. And guess what? I got a second message saying hello, Amin.
So it knew in quotations that Amin was the string that you wanted to use for the variable name.
Yes,
but when I just put Amin with no quotations, it thought I was actually putting another variable in.
Yeah, it was thinking that you had some variables somewhere, Tony, that I need to reference, but I never saved any information regarding Amin as a variable. So yes, that was the confusing part. So once we gave it the string, what it did was it stored that information within this parameter, this variable name, and then it used that information to print this message, hello, with my name.
Right.
All right, so there's one other way that you can actually print a message not using a comma. So in this situation, it's not really joining the information together, it's just displaying it. There's a way for us to join information together, which is called to concatenate in computer science. So instead of a comma, I can actually have a plus sign. So if I did plus, it's going to join the hello along with the name, which is a string, together. And if I run it using Control R, you'll notice something different compared to when we use the comma. And here, it didn't give me a space between hello and Amin.
Is there a way we can fix that?
Yes. So if I go to Control and left, there's multiple ways, but one easy way is I can actually go at the very end of O and just put a space between it. And if I run it this time, Tony, you'll see I get that little message with that space that I needed. All right, now let's do one more and we'll try to break this to see. Actually, yeah, let's try it. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, let's say if a user in this situation, instead of passing a string, passes a numerical value of 2. Now let's go back to what we did earlier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this plus and I'm going to go back to what we did with the comma, because I want to show you something here. I want to make a point. So if we use a comma, remember, it's not trying to join this information together. It's just really displaying it with a space. So if I run this program at this point, what do you think it's going to happen? Do you think we're going to get an error because I put a numerical value? Do you think it's going to be perfectly fine? What's going to be happening at this point? Okay, so let's go ahead and do Control R. And you'll notice it was not really bothered. And Brad, you're exactly right. So it did hello too. Guess what? It was not bothered by the fact that you gave it a numerical value and not a string. And it was perfectly fine with it. Now here's where we get into some trouble. So let's say if we were to use the plus, which is to concatenate. Remember, concatenate actually means it's going to join those two together. In this situation, you'll notice the left is a string, but what I passed was a numerical value. So now if I try to run this program as is, if I did Control and R, you'll notice it says, okay, can convert int object to a string. So if I go back here, what's happening is it doesn't like that this name is a number that I'm trying to attach with the plus to a string. Now there's a workaround, okay? If you go into menu, if you go into built-ins, and if you go into types, you'll notice I have a str. It's a function. So what this function is going to do is it's going to basically convert this numerical value into a string. Now, the only thing that we have to fix here is as soon as I call down that string, you'll notice the name is not inside of those parentheses. So I'm going to hit backspace since I deleted the parentheses, I'm going to make sure that I have parentheses at the very end. So what's happening here is it's going to take this numerical value, which is 2, convert it to a string, and it will have no issue with joining those two together at this point. So if I do Control and R, you'll notice no error is thrown at us. So when you're coding, when your students are coding, if you ever get that little message that you get with converting, can't convert an object to a string, know that we have the str that's going to allow us to concatenate, which is to join those together. So I'm going to do Control and left. And know that at this point, I can type in a string or a numerical value, and my function, so Control R, will not be bothered by it at all. In computer science, we call that being creating a robust program. So that means the users can't break it. So I've just made sure that if a user does put in a numerical value, my program works without any glitches.
I mean, I noticed that every time we're running this second function, this hello name function, our hello world is also running. Do we have to run both functions each time?
We don't. That's a good point. So what we can do is we can actually comment this function out. So we can actually comment that out. So if you want to do that, we can just put a little pound or hash. And what it will do is it'll act like this is basically not a executable code. It's just a message. So when I run this at this point, Tony, if I do Control and R, you'll notice that it will not run the first function call. It's going to only run the second function call, which was hello name.
Nice. So you can have several functions in your program, but just comment out the ones that you don't want to run currently if you're trying something else.
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
great.
All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and, so we've been saving our .py, but you'll notice we've not been saving our hello world. So what I want to do is I want to do Control, Save. So now we're done with the hello world. We're going to go into our last program, which is tax. So what I want to do is I want to start a new file. And to be able to do that, so don't forget, you want to hit Control and hit Save. I have no asterisk, so that means everything is good to go. I'm going to start a new program, and my shortcut key for it is if you do Control and N for new. If you haven't saved anything previously, it will tell you, hey, you forgot to save some information. Do you want to do that now? I recommend you do it. Now, if you don't want to save it, that's really up to you. But Control N will basically start all fresh. And we're going to start off a new program. And we're going to click on Python, which is A. We're going to do new. And we're going to call this TAX for tax.
And I mean, I'm hoping when you're working on this next program that you can show us how you can get the program to ask the user for information.
So let's do that, Tony. I think that's a great call. So maybe we can actually do it on this program. Let's go ahead and ask a user. So like we did earlier, where we asked the user in the call to give us some information, maybe we can actually do it within the function call. So we're not going to ask them for any information within the call. As soon as the function runs, we will ask them for some information. So I love that idea. So let's do that, Tony.
Okay.
So I'm going to do menu. I'm going to do edit. I'm going to click on number 3 for comment. So let's do this. We'll say define a function with user info within, or we'll say inside, user info inside the function. Okay. So not within the call, but inside the function itself. All right, so we'll do menu. We'll go into built-ins. We're going to go into functions, define a function. So since we're talking about tax, it would make sense for us to call this function also TAX, tax. And I'm going to click on my right arrow of the keypad. And so, Tony, like you said, we're going to say, you know what, the user doesn't have to provide any information. We're just going to say we don't need any info from the user. We're going to get that info within the block itself when the function is called on. So I'm going to hit bottom.
Okay.
So now we're going to ask the user for some information. So we need a variable to store that information that's provided by the user. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this variable user info, okay, or user num. Let's use. So I have a variable called user num, and I'm going to save whatever information that's provided by the user in this variable called user num. Okay. So there's actually a function we can use, but before we actually start doing this, we need to think about this. Since we're asking about tags, we're expecting the user to give us a numerical value. So we know we want a numerical value to be stored within our user num. So if you click on menu, you go into built-in, and if you go under types, you'll see that there's a type called an int and a float. So the reason I don't want an int, which is an integer, is because I know I'm working with tags, so I could definitely get a user who gives me 12.3, or they can give me 12.59. They can give me a decimal value. So an int doesn't have decimal, a float does. So I'm going to click on float. So what this is telling me is whatever the information that's provided by the user will be stored as a float. That's what's going to happen here. So next, I'm going to click on menu, go into built-ins. Now I want some information from the user. So often we've given some output, but we want something to do with the input. So we're going to go to number 6, and you'll notice there is a function called input. So this input is a function which allows us to give the user some information, and it stores this information as a string. So anytime by default, this input will always store information as a string. That's why we needed the float, because if we didn't, our user number would have been actually a string that we cannot work with. So within input, we're going to display a message to our user. We're going to say, enter an amount. Okay, and I'm going to close parentheses. And remember, to be able to get those, we can click on the key right next to G, or we can do Control and multiplication key. So what's going to happen here, Tony, is we're going to basically display this message, which is enter an amount.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever information that's provided by the user, the number will be make sure that it's a float. So even if they put 12, it's going to be saved as 12.0. And then they'll save that information within the variable called user num.
Okay.
Right? And now we need to, I'm sorry, Tony, you were saying something.
No, and so I'm just thinking, and so then we're going to take that amount that's in user num and we're going to calculate the tax on it.
So let's do that. So let's go ahead and print that information. Let's do menu. All right, so we're going to do a print statement. So we're going to do under built-ins. So we're going to do built-ins. We're going to do inputs and outputs. And let's do print. So what do we want to print? Well, I know I want to print the user num, and I want to actually tell them how much tax. Now, I'm in Texas, so I'm going to be a little biased if I want to do this differently. I'm going to click on multiplication. I'm going to multiply this user num by what? In Texas, it's 0.0825. So now if we actually did this, so now we have our tax function. We've stored the user information. Remember, input is a string. It's going to save that numerical value as a float. Then the last thing it's going to do is going to print, take the numerical value, times it by 0.0825. And the last thing we want to do is hit backspace. And we want to run this program to make sure it works as desired. So we're going to do Control and R. But guess what? What happened? Why didn't it do anything? What happened, Tony? Why didn't it work as intended?
You forgot to push the bar key and do the method call to call that function. And I actually have a question about that in just a minute after we run it. So we have to call.
Sure.
We have to call it because we defined a function, right?
And we have no parameters. So remember, there's no parameter needed. So now we should be able to do Control and R. And you notice it says enter an amount. We can enter, let's do 27 is my amount that I want to enter. And you'll notice it gives me the tax at this point, 0.0825. It's being displayed at this point because that's what I asked it to do. So Tony, you said there was a question that we need to address?
Yes. So I have a couple, but one is, so I noticed that from the very beginning, our very first Hello World, we defined a function in that program. Each time we did a new function. And I think we could have just done a single print statement that said print Hello World or print username, you know, and not define a function.
Oh, I love that question.
Yeah.
So I think is it Brad that asked that question?
Yes.
So Brad, the reason why, okay, so I would answer it in two folds. One is, as a math teacher, I felt like when I was teaching programming, functions was a natural connection for students to make using inputs and outputs. So that's one connection I was able to make right away. So when we talk about, okay, where do we kind of interact with that? Again, that definition is limited because often in math, we have numerical values that are being passed and we have to pass something in this, but function was a natural conversation to have. Another reason that we're doing functions here, Brad, is because think about it. If we find a particular string of codes beneficial that's going to be used over and over, it doesn't make sense for us to keep writing those codes over and over. It's better to write that one time and simply call that function. So we call that reusability. We can reuse it over and over, and we don't have to worry about writing the same code lines over and over. I'm hoping, Brad, that helped. The second reason is, think about this, Brad. Let's say we have this tax function being used by multiple calls, and let's say our tax in Texas changes from 0.0825 to 0.083. Now, I can simply, if I had a function, go back and change in one location the value of 0.0825. But if I didn't have functions, if I had just line of codes, I would have to identify every location where I used that code, and I would have to replace that with the proper value at that point.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
So I like our program, but I noticed if you go back to the shell, I feel like we could enhance this program a little bit.
Sure, what are you thinking, Tony? And I think we've got maybe 2 or 3 minutes where we can do something before we hand it over to Mike. So tell me what you're thinking.
Well, a couple of things, like we could put a $ next to enter the amount, so the 27, but I'd like to say like maybe your tax is, and it tells you that $2.22 is the tax.
So let's do it.
And then maybe what your total is, because that's what I really want to know is what's my total with my amount and the tax. So I don't know.
So let's do the total first, Tony. Do you mind if we kind of knock off the total first? So what I want to do is I want to go back to where the user number was defined. I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to have a new variable that's called total. So what I want to do is I'm going to have a second variable. So I have a user num. I'm going to have a variable called total, and my total will be equal to what? So let's think about it. We already know what our tax is, so which is user num times 0.0825. what do I need to add to this, Tony, so that way I can get my total amount that I need?
My amount, my user num, right?
So user num. Good. So now we have a variable that we've saved our total to, and now we can actually display both of that information. So there's a couple of ways we can do this. One way we've talked about, we can actually do this with comma, right? So we can say, maybe we'll display the total, comma, and then it would be this. So let's just run this to make sure that both of the things that work. So I can do Control and R, and I'll do 27, Tony. And you'll notice I have this, but again, it doesn't look really aesthetically pleasing, does it, Tony? It just looks like it's just a bunch of.
Yeah, I wouldn't remember what those numbers were for. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's kind of see if we can kind of knock this out. So we can say your amount is. So remember, here's the amount. So we're going to do plus, but remember to be able to join my information that's given by the total, it needs to be a string. So I'm going to have str. So let me do this. Let me actually go into my computer view, and let me go ahead and make sure you can see that. So I'm going to do str, and remember, you can find that in menu. So if we actually go back to menu, built-ins, we're going to go under types, and we can actually find str there. Just a reminder. So I'm going to do str, and what is my amount? Well, the total amount is just the variable total. So your amount is, and I'm going to do plus, I'm going to say a period here. And let me actually apologize. I know you might not be able to see this. So your amount is str, the total. And then I'm going to say with tax, actually, and your total amount is, sorry. And we're going to say your tax is, now one last thing we need to do, Tony, which is we need to do plus, and remember we need to do str because this is a string that's being provided by the calculation, right? So this is a numerical value. So we need to convert this numerical value to a string at this point. Yes, Devin, you're exactly right. We can use the round, and we might be running fairly close, but you're exactly right. If we use the round, then we should be able to get that. You're completely right about that.
Uh-oh, something
Yeah, something really.
Something copied over there, right? Yeah.
It did, didn't it?
Yeah, that's okay.
So let me. Oh, you know what?
Yeah,
It's probably
I know we're out of time. If you can just show us where that round is. I saw it real quickly when you got the str. If you can just show us where that round is.
So if you go into menu and you go into built-ins, you go into types, you'll notice that it takes in two parameters. So one other reason, Brad, that I love talking about functions, you are using functions within Python. So this round is a function that requires two parameters. X is basically going to be the number, and then N is how many digits that you need. So Mike, I know that I am probably giving you 1 minute less than I planned on giving, so I do apologize about going over. If you have any questions, you can definitely put in the chat window. Mike, take it away. I apologize about stealing your 1 minute from you.
Thanks. I mean, I think it was worth it. I think they'd rather hear you guys talk for a minute than me. We're really excited, as I mentioned earlier, that we have some T-Cube summer workshops that are coming to an area near you. Some are face-to-face and some are virtual this year. As promised, to one lucky winner, we're going to be giving away a T-Cube summer workshop registration, and tonight's lucky winner is Daniel Irving. So Daniel, congratulations. We really hope to see you at T-Cube summer workshop, and we'll be in touch, Daniel, over the next coming days over email to give you a little more information about that. To receive a certificate of attendance, go ahead and click the link that I posted in the chat window. Also listed as a link for the documents that were used tonight by Tony and Amin. And if you're watching this on demand, go and copy that link into your favorite browser to receive your certificate. If you need to get a hold of us for any reason, maybe it's updating your TI-Nspire teacher software, or you have other questions, feel free to give us a call at 1-800-TI-CARES or drop us an email, ti-cares@ti.com. Big thanks to Tony and Amin for everything you shared tonight. I know it was a lot, but I think it was good. So thanks so much for putting everything together.
Again, thanks for the opportunity for us to come out and share this with all the wonderful individuals that are interested in incorporating Python into their classroom or being able to integrate that into their classrooms.
Thanks, Mike. It was fun.
And thanks everyone for joining us. We hope to see you back online next week. Have a great night.